Section 2, and it's called the mass media. And so the big idea is, where do we get our information? How does this information shape what we think about particular issues? And so the examples of print media, electronic. Also, we'll be talking about a few legal terms in relation to what we can do with free speech and what we cannot. And we'll also be even thinking how speech can be harmful. And so the first question I want to ask, do you think that the media's need to make a profit causes them to misrepresent some issues? Like it or not, we're getting our information from those who are paid to provide us with information. It is in their best interest to get the highest ratings or the most clicks and likes, and so they must curate their information in a certain way so that we will choose to consume it, because after all, that's how they make their money. And unfortunately, this can have a negative impact. Think about the importance and impact of our nation's media. The media is extremely influential on politics, and I hope to provide some examples with that. And the government also sets and helps set the public agenda with reacting often to what they're seeing in the media. And so the mass media has a profound influence, not only on us, the electorate, but even on elected officials. And it connects people in a way that perhaps never before have we been connected with our public officials. All of these folks that we've invited, all of our representatives, I follow them on social media, and so I see what they post on a daily basis. And that gives me a very realistic and current view on what they're doing. So examples of the media that we consume. The oldest would be print media. Print media are any types of information that we consume that are in the printed form. For example, newspapers, magazines, newsletters, brochures, even books fall into print media. Perhaps the more common that we consume on the regular is electronic media. Obviously, the internet might be the most common that we utilize today, though radio is still relevant as we drive to and fro to school or work, but also even still television. But again, increasingly, many of us get our information and news from the internet. And so, what we have to realize when we are consuming professional information is that someone is making that information accessible to you, and they're getting paid to do it. And they have a profit incentive to keep you engaged. And so it's why you don't often hear news about everything being happy in the world today, because no one clicks on that. No one bothers. They want to hear the juicy stuff. And so the media has a profound influence on the public agenda. And by public agenda, I mean these issues that are considered most significant by the public and by government officials. So when we hear about a problem in the media, and if it's something that is relevant to us and something that we are engaged and interested in, whatever it may be, then we are more easily than ever able to before. We are able to express our concerns publicly. And the more people that express those concerns publicly, it can become a trending issue on any form of social media. When an issue becomes trending, then politicians are listening. And that will often prompt government officials into action. Political candidates are especially sensitive to what's trending in the media and with popular public opinion. And they'll watch for what these trending issues are, and they will use that knowledge to write their speeches because they want to make sure they are speaking to issues that are relevant and concerning and real to each of us. And so once again, that's how you get Ted Cruz cooking bacon with a machine gun. So politicians are aware of who journalists are, often are on a first-name basis. And journalists are one of the important safeguards of our democracy. They keep the public aware of important events going on. Often the government will leak information to the media purposefully to gauge to see how it will play. A leak is a release of a secret government document by an anonymous source, usually from government officials, usually to a news media outlet. For example, the Pentagon Papers, which revealed that the United States had plans to go into Vietnam even before the Gulf of Tonkin incident. Those papers were released in 1975. They were very damaging to the administration at that time. And things like that get leaked all the time. So leaks can be purposeful. They can also be perpetrated by disgruntled employees to damage someone's character or reputation. But oftentimes they are used to test the public reaction to an idea, or even to manipulate the public opinion to gain favor for an idea. If they can get ahead of a story, they can control the narrative of the story as it's unfolding. Even though the media can be manipulated, and even though we can easily be manipulated, the media still serves its important watchdog purpose. It still makes us aware of corruption and still gives us a way to hold our politicians accountable for wrongdoings. But often the question is raised about the concerns of national security against the public's need to know something. For example, recently documents related to the Kennedy assassination have been released as part of the Freedom of Information Act. Some of those documents are still being scrutinized to determine whether or not they can be released to see if they will affect national security in any way. We have a right to know what happened, but still we can't assume that we should know everything because it might harm agents in the field. And so the press are often invited to witness important events, but they are often required to withhold information from the public for purposes of security. And so leaks, again, can serve various purposes. They can be of great benefit to journalists. Sometimes they are intended to damage a person's reputation. And then, of course, sometimes they are used to test how an idea will fly. Okay, so the media is protected by the First Amendment of the U.S. Constitution. The government protects the ability of the mass media to operate freely. And so in the First Amendment, it guarantees freedom of the press from some particular things. For example, freedom from prior restraint. This is a term we saw yesterday. Prior restraint means censorship of materials before they are published. Censorship. Regardless of the Mueller investigation's results, we will be aware of them, and the president can do nothing to stop that. because he cannot exercise prior restraint. He cannot censor that information. There are limits, however. There are real limits to the freedom of press. For example, libel. Libel is a written untruth that is harmful to someone's reputation. The press have an obligation to present the facts, because if they tell an untruth and that untruth is harmful to someone's reputation, they can be brought to court for it. It's a crime called libel. In fact, the United States Supreme Court ruled that public officials must prove actual malice. Malice means evil intent by the publisher. So you can't commit libel accidentally, according to the United States Supreme Court. You have to try, you have to mean to harm someone with what you are writing in order for it to be considered libel. Media has the right to keep its sources secret. In fact, the Federal Communications Commission is a regulatory commission that exists for the purposes of ensuring that our freedom of speech is protected and that airways are kept a safe place for free speech to be expressed. In fact, this was the same group that was regulating net neutrality until recently. Lastly, the question is, should the FCC have increased powers to censor content of television broadcasts? Regardless of your opinions, that has recently happened with the repeal of net neutrality, and I guess we'll see what happens.